Yeah, it's streaming live.
All right. Hello. Good morning. Welcome to another live chat here at Next App Social on our Next App Social channel here on YouTube. I, as always, am Richelle Wilson, and I'm joined by Joanne Buford. And today we're talking about books, the books that have had incredible impacts on us personally in our lives or careers, and we want to share them with you. But before we jump into it, if you're watching with us here live or on the replay, please make sure you hit that subscribe button below so that you never miss an interview, a live or really incredible discussion that we have here on Next Stop Social. So diving in, when Joanne brought up that we were going to talk about books, I was thinking about how you can Google till you're blue in the face, the top 10, the top 20, the top 50 books you need to read as an entrepreneur or small business owner that is going to help you in life and in your career. And what's crazy about when you do that is all those lists are going to be different, right? Some of the books you might see repeating here and there, but the reason, we want to talk about this today, and we're talking about our favorite books, is that reading is not just a way to learn, but really gain experience and level up in your life and in your journey and your career through someone else's journey, right? You can learn and level up vicariously through these authors. You don't always have to make the mistakes yourself. You don't always need to do things by trial and error. And it is so powerful to learn from someone else who has done what we haven't, or has done what we're trying to do, right? Who's reached the success that we want, who's pushed through odds and overcome challenges. So when you are reading as an entrepreneur and from an entrepreneurial space, it instinctively will create inspiration for you. It creates more space for skills. It shows you new way of thinking, new insights, and how you do business in general. So every entrepreneur in every business and every niche can benefit from the knowledge through reading.
Yeah, listening to you reminds me of the impact that reading has made on my life. And I'm thinking about a classic argument. I got to go there. I got to be a little bit nerdy. But a classic argument between Booker T. Washington and his ilk, and the arguments were oftentimes made on the other side by people like W.E. Du Bois about the importance of reading, right? And there's a classic argument that took place in the late 1800s, early 1900s about why learning and reading was so important, right? And, some people would say, well, look, what can a slave who's sitting in a room with not a pot to piss on and basically eating and bathing out of the same out of the same hole every single day, how can a book benefit them, right? You need to put a plow in their hand. You need to give them a good work ethic and a whole lot of hope and faith to transcend their circumstances, right? And the counter argument that was oftentimes made by W. Du Bois was, look, you also need to give that child imagination. You also need to give that child the ability to see and believe and know that there's another reality out there and that it's accessible. It's within their fingertips. It's not like people who are not slaves or who do not live lives of forced bondage and victimization, breathe different air, have different blood that run through their veins. You can go out there and you can get it too, right? And for me, growing up in the quote unquote inner city, ghetto, hood, whatever you want to call it, all right, spend the majority of my time in those circumstances, reading for me was an outlet. It was a way to know that people think differently. There's a world out there that I'm unawares of. There's a life of satisfaction that's available to me. And then oftentimes reading these authors, particularly those who are like honest about their circumstances and who they are, it also let me know that these people were everyday folk. They weren't particularly special. Most of the success stories that we admire and revel at aren't particularly intelligent. They aren't particularly gifted. but their habits and their mindsets and their thinking and their imagination is what oftentimes separated them from everyone else. And if certainly if they could do it, I could too. And that is another benefit from reading, right? Aside from what you can learn technically, it broadens your horizons, right? It lets you know that there is a way of living. And for me, that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? Entrepreneurship ultimately is about shooting your shot.
Yeah.
You know, everyone playing it safe. I mean, people fail at playing it safe too. You know, people get fired from jobs they hate and can't stand. People, people get involved in endeavors that, you know, aren't of real interest. They're surrounded by people that really don't care for them, and vice versa. And look, if you're going to fail anyway, why not fail pursuing something worthwhile, right? It gives you energy, and reading gives you the tools and the wherewithal to imagine that different life to get there. So I'm done preaching. I just had to go there.
No, I think it's important. It's important because not every, you know, I grew up reading, and reading was a hobby. It's always been a hobby and activity of mine, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. And especially if it's not something you grew up doing, and you are a small business owner, entrepreneur, and it wasn't habit that's already been instilled, it's important to understand how impactful that still can be for you now, even if it wasn't something you always did.
Yes. Yes. You know, something else that I think will help people along their reading journey, right, is the super majority of the time when I pick up a book, especially at this stage in my life, it's for a purpose, right? It's less exploratory, though I do read books sometimes just for curiosity, exploratory reasons. But oftentimes it's because I'm trying to accomplish a particular goal, and I feel like, okay, this book may have what I'm looking for. And so it's one of those things, just like going into a training, right? You have to go into the training wanting to come out a different person, right? You have to want a certain type of outcome. And when you read with that in mind, your attitude towards the book is different. There are many books that I have read. There's one I'm reading right now that sucks, in my opinion. I mean, and I'm an avid reader. I'll crush a book in a day if I'm not distracted and I have a million things. I mean, I'll knock it down. And reading this book has been like, for me, like pulling molars out of my mouth, you know. But because I walk in with the attitude that I want to get something out of this book, I want to be a better person out of this book, I'm still finding a nugget here and there in that book. So it's not a complete wasted read, right? But that can happen with a book that's very dense and very exciting, and you're having a hard time reading it, not because it's boring, but because it's just so much good content in it, right?
Yeah.
The bottom line is you want to go into that process of reading and learning with the attitude that this is, when I come out the other end, I'm going to be a better person for it. And when you take that attitude, you'll get more value out of many of the books that we're going to share, or books that you'll read along your own personal entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add too is that I saw a really very technical tip with reading about how, you know, if you get a book and you're just like someone who, you know, buys books or gets books from the library or whatever, and then you just end up never reading them. I think a lot of it is because we think we got to like sit down, and I'm that person who's got to sit down and get it all done in one shot or a couple days or whatnot, just because I get really sucked into it and I want to. But I saw this woman who basically said like, okay, I want to read this book by this day, right? That gives me this many days. She divided those days by the number of pages there are in the book. And she broke down, okay, here's how many pages I need to read a day. And it's like, that's closer to only maybe like 10 or 15 or 30 pages a day. And that's way more obtainable than you trying to feel like, oh man, I gotta crush this right away. It's so if break it down however you need to. Truly, if you only have 5 to 10 minutes a day to read, you're gonna get more reading done than most people do. Period.
Yeah.
You're just in general.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like this: 10 pages a day, over the course of a month, is 300 pages. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
But just a measly, well, measly is relative, but anyway, 10 pages a day, right? Which is something I firmly believe everyone can do. Depending on how fast you read, it may only take you 10 minutes. It may take you 30 minutes, but 10 pages a day is 300 pages. At the end of a year, that's over 300 pages. That's over what, 3,600 pages that you've read, which means you've probably read about 12 to 15 books over that course of time.
Right.
And look, 12 to 15 books. If you read 12 to 15 books over the course of 5 years, you're reading more than 90% of the US population.
Right.
So trust me, if you're knocking down 10 pages of a good book a day, you're going to be a different person at the end of the year. And you're definitely going to be performing head over heels over the majority of your competition. And so if nothing else, if nothing else but winning and just being better and able to achieve more is what motivates you, put that right in context. 10 pages a day, over 12 to 15 books a year. You can do it. Yeah.
All right. I'll let you start with your books because I know you got books on books on books.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin. This was tough for me because, I mean, literally, I've probably forgotten about more titles than most people have read. I know that. But also I had to think to myself, okay, what books have made the biggest difference in my entrepreneurial journeys? I've read books that have impacted me in other ways, but to be more specific in terms of what it means to be an entrepreneur, I think one of the first books that I'll probably start with that really made a huge impact in my life is Today Matters by John C. Maxwell. That is a book I recommend to everyone. I mean, look, you can't go wrong with John C. Maxwell. I just believe that. You pick up any of his books, you're going to be in a really good place. So John C. Maxwell, if you ever listen to this, hit me up for that plug. But any respect, no, Today Matters. It really opened my eyes in terms of how to deal with that oxymoron of time management, right? In that book, he makes it crystal clear it's not about time management. You can't manage your time. You can't negotiate with time. Time is not going to be your friend. You can't do anything about time. Time does not care, but you can manage your priorities. And if you have, and how you manage your priorities is by getting a deep understanding of what your values are and finding a way to manifest your values through your priorities into the life that you want to live. And anytime I hear anyone complain about not having enough time, anytime I hear anyone complain about not having, I guess, a methodology, or they feel like they're just going to and from and not making any progress, I immediately recommend that book. One of my favorites.
Yeah. I'm also going to keep a list for everyone in the description of every book we go over as well, so that you can read them as well. The first book I wanted to touch on was it's called Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. And Ryan Holiday has written a lot of books. He's kind of at this point in his life, I'd say he's taking more of the approach of a modern philosopher, but he was a very, or he is still, not was, but a very experienced, very notable marketer in like Hollywood and stuff for a long time. And Trust Me, I'm Lying was one of his, it was a very controversial book because it talked about how marketing really works in the large media space. So things like fake news, scandalous rumors, how products appear and people appear to go viral out of nowhere, celebrities that blow up overnight, or random articles, right, that seem to like now be everything we're reading, right? He did a lot of this work of how to make those things happen personally. And really though, the book is about how media manipulation works. And the reason why this book is not the traditional, like, oh, this is my small business entrepreneurial book, but it had the most impact, not just on me because I am a marketer, but it made me think far more deeply and critically about the work that I do, how it happens when I'm working with clients. It really, his purpose of writing the book was for people to start thinking about morality, right? Morality and ethics in their marketing and what you're doing and what you're contributing to the world. He got a lot of flack for writing this book because he exposed a lot of things that the media did not want. You know, any other marketer he also kind of laid a blueprint that if you want to be super evil, you can just go ahead and do it, right? But I thought this book was really impactful, especially it wasn't really an autobiography sort of thing, but it sort of was of showing like how successful people sometimes get really successful. And I just felt that this book is always it's always a good one to kind of bring you back a little bit into your reality. If you're ever at a point where you're feeling like you just can't get ahead, you don't understand why your thing isn't taking off, your thing isn't working, this is a really good overarching book to read to just remind you that there's a lot of political motives, there's a lot of other motives in play for just things that happen. So I think it's an important book for entrepreneurs to read because it's going to help you approach how you promote your business a little bit differently.
Yeah, a book that I was thinking about as I was listening to you that kind of had a similar impact on me was a book that I read relatively recent. I think within the last 2 years, definitely I read it. And when it was called Uplifting Service by Kaufman, right? And we talk about this ideal in entrepreneurship circles of sometimes in the beginning, you're doing work that you're not getting paid for. So later on, you get paid for work you no longer have to do. And that book is just chock full of ideals, and it's chock full of examples on a macro and micro level about how that principle can really serve you as a business owner. Because we talk about it, right? And it's easy to say that, right? When you're first, for a person's already accomplished, you're generating revenues, you got a book of business. And oftentimes people want to get there, right? They want to get to that 30,000 of organic followers, keyword organic, right? They want to get to a point where you're sitting home and your phone's ringing, your clients are calling you. People want to get there where they're not concerned or worried about branding and marketing every single day because they've built the reputation, they've built the brand, their character has been on full display. They want to get there. And that Uplifting Service book talks about what that looks like, right? And, you know, for me, it's just something that I directly attribute to my success. I've made so many errors and judgments. I've made so many mistakes, whether it comes to marketing, how I've positioned myself over the course of time, so having the right mentors and not paying attention, and then having the wrong mentors and not knowing, particularly early on in my entrepreneurial journey and business life. But the one thing that has kept my business afloat, that's kept me successful, allowed me, I contribute maybe 99% of my success to this, and it's the ideal I've always been about, making sure people feel like they've gotten more from me than I've received in return, right? And that book kind of lays it out, number one, what that looks like and the real impact it can have. And it also gives you a blueprint in terms of how to execute it in your own business. And so that book, it surprised me when I initially read it. And then when I started kind of implementing some of the things in the book and kind of reflecting on my entrepreneurship journey, I was like, this book is powerful. Everyone needs to read it. So Uplifting Service by Kaufman, got to have that on your bookshelf.
Nice, nice. Another author that, so it's like two books that I have actually next. They go together though, in my opinion, mostly because they're written by the same guy, but it's Cal Newport, and he's pretty known, right? And his main book then was titled Deep Work. But the books that I think you should read together, well, you read Deep Work and then immediately after read Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport as well. So Deep Work is, it talks about, you know, the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task, right? When you can do this deep work and you can quickly master complicated information, and you're going to produce better results in less time. And it makes you better at what you do and help you gain more of a fulfillment towards what you're doing in your craft. So it's like a superpower in our very competitive and distracting society. And a lot of us have lost the ability to do deep work. We are spending our days in email and social media and just not even, we really don't understand how to get out of that cycle. And he really breaks that down. And what I like about the way Cal Newport approaches his writing is that he doesn't argue that distraction is bad, right? He really is showing you how to take advantage of what you have happening around you so that you can shift these habits, things around like working deeply, embracing boredom, and how to step away from social media to an extent, which is why it's so important after you finish that book to read the next book, which is Digital Minimalism, because it's really going to help you stop looking at your phone, right? It's teaching you how to get lost in a good book, how to actually start a project and finish it, how to feel like you want and you can have and feel good about leisure in your day, right? He emphasizes the urgency around quietness and how to rethink your relationship with social media and digital things in general. And I think that's a really important book because or the books, like ones to go back to, especially when you are feeling the rat race cycle, a little bit of what you're doing. And I would even argue like this is a great book to read at the first of the year after you've done, like, especially if you're product based, if you've done all these holiday pushes, if you've done all this planning for, your new year or whatever. Like a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs, while everyone in the 9-to-5 world is kind of slowing down here at the end of the year for the holidays, we're ramping up because this is our time, right? So it's probably a really good one to read when you're in the thick of like those cycles or right at the end after them.
God, there's two of them here. Tools of Titans by Tim Ferris, which you'll hear me quote over and over again.
Yeah.
I love that book. From health to wealth to diet to habits to priority management. Just that's one thing that will be like a fantastic life. Can you imagine traveling the world and just interviewing some of the most successful people that we know in every field and endeavor you can think of? And that's how I think about Tools and Titans. I mean, that's a must read in my humble opinion, on a yearly basis, because there's so many nuggets that you can pick up from these musicians and from these people who are in the military background and from these athletes and mathematicians. I mean, he goes in from every different background. Just highly beneficial. So many nuggets and gems. I find something different every single read, and it does make a difference. I feel like that book pushes me ahead 3 months immediately every time I read a section or portion of it. The other book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And, here's the thing. When you are an entrepreneur, and particularly when you make the decision to scale, right, to grow, and scale can mean scaling your influence and your impact. Scale can also mean taking on employees or taking on partners. And, there's a very trite definition of leadership that's out there, and people will basically say all leadership is influence, right? The ability to influence. And you have to have that, right? How do you go from one McDonald's or one Starbucks to thousands, right? And you got to know that leadership is an important piece. And it's very important for actually individuals who believe themselves to be leaders already. Particularly, this is for you if you're coming out of corporate America, right? So you have the academic chops, you have the professional chops, you have these litany of achievements and trophies and banners and awards and speaking engagements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the thing. That's important. You know how to lead yourself, but leading other people is skill trade, right? Being able to take those things that you have and that you embody and present them and teach them and create systems where you can duplicate yourself. That's leadership. And oftentimes I hear entrepreneurs complain about not finding good employees, or complaining about not finding good talent, or not being able to retain good talent and good employees. And the first question I want to challenge them to ask themselves is, how did you contribute to that? How are you contributing to that? Do you have systems in place where somebody who may not have the academic professional chops like you do can still come into the environment that you've created and excel and to achieve and to be able to deliver whatever goods and services you want them to deliver, right? That's leadership. And so I think that 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell, golden. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're a community activist, if you are working in corporate America, and you want to take a more entrepreneurial approach to the things that you're doing, right? That 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is just priceless.
I think what's really important also, we're talking about a lot of books that I myself have read, just even the books I've mentioned several times. Like I'm not a really good, impactful book is, we were kind of talking about this before we hopped on, is that you can take these books and you can read, and they're all going to be good to read at any point, right? But sometimes different seasons of your life, the book is going to have a lot more impact. So, you can read a book and it could have been, you could have acknowledged, like, oh, this was good, I learned something, but then you come back to it at a different point, or you think about it or a passage from it or something again later on, especially if that book keeps coming back up in your head. That might be a good time to pick that book back up. And because that means that there's something about what you remember in there that's triggering what you're doing, how you're acting, or what's going on, that if you dove back into it, you might get even more out of it. So I think that it's important to remember that it's not just about racking up numbers of like, look how many books I read, because sometimes it's reading the same book 5 times, like if it's a good book, you're going to take a lot out of it at different points. So I think that's important to touch on as well. Another book I wanted to talk about was Building a Story Brand, which has been around for a long while, by Donald Miller. And this book is probably, it's not a long book. It's really straightforward, and it's very much designed to help you figure out how to talk about your business, how to connect with your customers so that they choose you over your competition every time, how to showcase the benefits of your products, your ideas, your services, and showing you why customers in general, your customers, are making a purchase with you, right? And I, like I said too, I love this book because it breaks it down very easily, so that you can talk about your business everywhere and spread your message everywhere and be very consistent with it in a very easy way. So this is one of those books where it's really not just enough to sit down and read it. Like, you need to do the work with the book. But he lays it out in a very cohesive, straightforward way. So if, talking about your competitive advantage, if working on that, what do you do statement, if you are feeling like a lot of your messaging on social media or email or even your website is kind of blah or falling flat, or people aren't just getting as hyped up and as excited as you are, this is a good book to read to help you tap into that for sure.
I like it. That's a book I need to revisit. Wow. Which one? Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. Breaking the habit of being yourself, right? We all know as entrepreneurs, we have to live on the fringes. We live on the edge, right? What makes entrepreneurs successful is that ability to see things before everyone else sees it. And also, we understand that at the end of the day, we're compensated for our ability to give, right? So we have to, in order to earn more, we have to become more. In order to have better relationships, we realize we have to be a different person, right? To be worthy of those relationships. And that book, in terms of, it forces you, number one, to take a critical look at yourself, to really inventory yourself, and ask yourself, are you really the person you need to be to achieve the things you want to achieve, right? And then it talks about how to work on your mind, and because at the end of the day, the world is not oftentimes what we see, but it's a reflection of how we see it, right? That's our reality. We can all be looking at the same photo and see 4 or 5 different things because it's a reflection of what's going on in here versus what's actually going on in that photo oftentimes. And that book really forces you to take inventory about how your thoughts, your beliefs, your behaviors, your self-concept, how it's really impacting your ability to have success and to be able to prevail with different challenges, whether it be personal, spiritual, physically, and definitely it's applicable when we talk about entrepreneurship and business ownership. So that's a book that I can go on and on and on about, but I'm gonna stop right there. The next one I have on my to-do list is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Now, Think and Grow Rich, everyone knows about that one, right? Mm-hmm. That's a must read. But Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, and the extent to which he does a deep dive on how your habits really do determine your destination. That book in my mind was just profound. And of course, Outwitting the Devil, right? He's writing this in the early 1900s. You know, people wanted to burn him at the stake for writing a book talking about outwitting the devil. Mm-hmm. But just like a lot of his works, I mean, being controversial at the time, we accept them as whatever today. But Outwitting the Devil, I think, is a book because, man, he's just so unapologetic in it that if people were to be reintroduced to that book, I think it would be just as controversial today as it was yesteryear. Mm-hmm. So that book, if you really want a kick in the butt, if you really need, quite frankly, a checkup from the neck up, you need, a chin check, if you will, to get your head right, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, it'll get you there.
I need to read that one for sure. Yeah. I think mindset, especially mindset books, those are just as powerful and impactful as these business strategy books. Mm-hmm. Just getting yourself in that right headspace. Right now, I'm currently reading Do Less by Kate Northrup. And my business coach actually sent this to me as kind of a parting gift when our sessions had ended. And it is a book more focused for women. Mm-hmm. But I really enjoy it so far. It's how to move away from trying to fit it all in, how to approach time management a different way, how we clearly don't understand time management, and tackling that obsession, especially the mental obsession with busyness and feeling, especially as women, that we need to do more in all aspects of our lives. So especially like if you're a woman, you're watching this, Do Less is a really, really good book, actionable book as well, but it's not, it is it's going to help you get that focus that you're looking for, especially if you're someone who wants to be a very high achieving person.
Okay, go in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
Snowball by Warren Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Snowball by Warren Buffett. For me, Warren Buffett is one of the most interesting people in the world because, I mean, let's just be real. Look at Warren Buffett. He wasn't going to win at athletics. He wasn't going to win at being a musician. Let's be real. He's very prophetic and his wisdom comes through, but he's not the most exciting public speaker.
No.
I mean,
yeah.
When you look at him at the end of the day, if it was not for this thing that we call investment planning, I don't know how he'd be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always fascinating to even listen to him. He's so humble, right? And he talks about this. He's like, look, I was born in the United States at the right time. The market was right surroundings, right people around him, inculcated the right habits, and lightning struck. And it was that confluence of different things that transpired, that mix that kind of propelled him, right? Now, let's not take anything away from him. Incredible work ethic, incredible intellect, incredible discipline, and being smart enough to not have to repeat others' mistakes. There's some of us, we just got to take them up on the head. That's the only way we learn. But he is a perfect example. Look, you don't have to do it. You don't have to go that direction. You can sit back, listen, and learn from other people's errors and their wins and learn those lessons that way too. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I love that book for that reason. Like, it was interesting, number one, to pick up all the wisdom that can be garnered from his come up, so to speak, and how he's been able to achieve what he's been able to achieve. And look, the bottom line, he's been on earth a lot longer than I have, and most of us listening to this. So anyone who can live that long and still be healthy, that's something to learn too, right? And be happy, the majority of it, from what we can ascertain, right, from his public life that he does let us into. But yeah, man, just a great book about discipline, and a great book about decision making, and a great book about just particularly, and this is why I think it resonates with me, when you don't grow up in environments where that stuff is readily available, when you're not growing up in environments where there are entrepreneurs legally who are succeeding, when you when you grow up in environments where you don't see those types of success stories, they're not accessible, right? Books like that are so absolutely important. So I'm a huge, 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 huge fan of that book, Snowball by Warren Buffett. Another book that is going to be a little bit weird too, Slavery by Another Name by Douglas Blackmon, Wall Street Journal reporter and author. It's a book about how after, well, you have de jure slavery, and then, right, which is slavery by law. And wow, did my brain just quit? It really did quit. It just quit right now. So you have de jure slavery. I think it's ex parte. But anyway, de jure slavery ends, but slavery didn't really end, right? Just because the laws changed, you still have people all over the United States for decades, if not even a full century after slavery fully ended, that were still living like slaves, right? Believe it or not, there were up until the 1960s, and even in somewhere pockets in the United States in the 70s, people were still living like slaves. They literally were living like Maxwell was cracking a whip. And he talks about how that also happened in the manufacturing and industrial industry, about how people were used like slaves in these industries. And why is this important, right? Because I know people are thinking one thing, but I'm gonna hit you in a different way. For me, it opened my eyes not to what just happened to ebony people, but it opened my eyes to what happened to people in general. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, we operate in a different bubble. We operate like, we think differently. We see the world differently. It's certain things we just don't even deal with. Like, I'll be transparent. It's going to sound bad, right? Because I'm supposedly someone who's really communally involved and cognizant of what's happening in people's lives. But I don't know what the minimum wage is, because I have not thought about the minimum wage in 20 years.
Yeah.
I have not thought about going to work a job and even being concerned about a wage. I've always thought, how can I earn more than everyone else? How can I put myself in a position where minimum wage, I've just never thought minimum anything when it comes to compensation, right? And this book was a reminder of how, look, it's a blessing to be in this capitalist society, to be in a society where we have these freedoms, where we can even have this type of discussion, right? There are countries where we were to mention some of these books, someone might be knocking on our doors 10 minutes later, like, for real, Rochelle, for real, Mr. Beaver, come this way. You know, it's a blessing, right, to even be able to have this. But at the same time, we have to admit that as entrepreneurs, sometimes it's easy to forget that people just aren't transactions, that people aren't just serial numbers, that people aren't just KPIs, that we're dealing with people's lives, and that the work that we do matters. That book really reminded me to have empathy. Right? So it just talks about how the Industrial Revolution, how the manufacturing industry really turned people's lives upside down, and had and oftentimes, while of course it rewarded them with monetary means to do certain things, it also just, man, you didn't want to be a coal miner coming up. Okay. Some of the way people, some of the living conditions, and I mean living conditions, most people spend their time at work, right? If you're working in a plant, if you're working in construction, you're spending the majority of your time at work, and you're trying to find 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep, if that, right? So for me, that book was eye-opening. Number one, just about how U.S. society has evolved, but it also opened my eyes to how difficult and trying things can be. And I just feel so blessed and fortunate when I read books like that to be able to be an entrepreneur. I do not take it for granted. It gave me a real appreciation for it. So
Nice. I need
Yeah.
to read that one for sure. Um, Another book that it's a fairly new book. It's only been out, I don't know, a year or two.
Mhm.
Is by Paul Jarvis. It's called Company of One, and he's a web developer, software developer. And he's a Canadian, just so he's out, but he lives like in the middle of nowhere in Canada, right?
Uh-huh.
And I've subscribed to his newsletter and I've participated in some other online teachings that he's given. And he wrote this book to really offer a different perspective of being small but mighty, right? For not the argument of not being the startup that wants to scale as fast as possible, but rather growing deliberately. Now, the book is called A Company of One. At no point in the book is he saying that you should just do everything yourself. That's the misconception with that title. But not everyone who is starting a business wants to take on a bunch of employees or be in meetings all the time or worrying about hyper expanding everything that they're doing. And that doesn't mean that because you don't want those things, that you have to sacrifice financial gains and wins, right? So what I appreciate about this book is that he himself is an example of this, and he shows a lot of other examples of this, and he breaks it down on how, there is an alternative to, especially if you're someone who has started a business for freedom of your lifestyle a little bit, if that's a big part of your values of being able to do things more on your time when you want. This is a good book to read, especially if you're in really any stage in business of understanding that it's more doesn't always, taking on more and bringing on more doesn't always equate to more money, more time, more freedom. That doesn't always work that way, and how to kind of look at it from another perspective as well.
I like it. I'm definitely going to pick that one up.
Mm-hmm.
Balance, man. You don't have to be what other people are being.
Right.
Entrepreneurs is about curating the life you want for yourself. De jour and de facto. I was going to come back to it. You know how I am. So de jour by law, de facto not by law, but factually still transpiring. Those are the two words I was looking for earlier.
Oh,
okay. Reginald Lewis, Why Should All the White Guys Have All the Fun? And Success Principles by Jack Canfield. Those two books opened my eyes to the fact that in entrepreneurial circles, even amongst business owners, sometimes people feel guilty about their success, right?
Yeah.
And the ideal of pursuing money and pursuing wealth and building large businesses and having more that you need. I know I dealt with that hurdle. I dealt with those handcuffs for a long time. And because a lot of us have been oftentimes taught that people who succeed, that become multimillionaires and billionaires, right, are somehow evil. That they exploited people to get there. That somehow they had to do wrong to have that type of success. And those two books opened my eyes to the fact that no, there are a lot of people who did, quote unquote, live right. They treated people right. They served people right. They took advantage of resources, and definitely, there is business competition. So sometimes someone's got to win and sometimes someone's got to lose, right? But it does not mean that you have to spend your time tearing other people's buildings down. Just build taller buildings, right? Mm-hmm. So that's another way of winning. Winning does not necessarily mean you're holding someone down. Just go out there and build taller buildings. And it kind of lifted the roof off my thinking. I had a conversation with a business owner yesterday about this because she kind of is dealing with this, right? Very successful, has a prominent name, but she's scared of financial success. She's scared of having more than what she needs. And the question I posed to her was, look, is it fair to say that whether you're earning 20,000 a year or 20 million a year, you're going to give most of it away? She says, yes. So, well, is it fair to say then the more successful you become, the more people you'll be able to help, which means you're scaling your ability to help people. Yeah, you have more than what you need, but you can take that extra and you can create organizations. You can create different tools and different mediums for other people to level up in their lives. And Success Principles and that book by Reginald Lewis really took the lid off me in terms of studying different entrepreneurs, studying success principles, and seeing that, no, there are people out here doing good work, helping a lot of people who, quite frankly, have earned a lot of the wealth that they have, right? And so those two books, if you're looking for, number one, just habits and ideals, but you're also looking for an example of what it means to be an entrepreneur and to make a living while making a difference, do good, right, by people and build things that matter and that help people. Or if you're looking for an example of somebody to study who went through trials and tribulations and really earned his way, man, that book by Reginald Lewis is powerful. And Success Principles by Jack Canfield is a great book as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting you brought up financial stuff a little bit with your example, and I think that's like a whole nother talk about finance books and whatnot. But one book that I felt, especially if you don't know nothing about money and you don't and it's all feeling very overwhelming and it's all feeling very like you're afraid to even pick up these books because you're afraid that you're not even going to understand what's in these books, right? One book that I think is really, really good at breaking it down to the point where truthfully a third grader, fifth grader should understand is The Latte Factor by John Mann. I think it's two authors, but it talks about how to achieve financial freedom in the form of a fictional story. Okay, so it helps you. Sometimes it helps to read. What I appreciate about this book is sometimes it helps to read it in that way rather than just information being thrown at you. It focuses on the small changes you can make today that have a big impact. And it talks about it from the point of view of a person who is struggling financially, right? It's a story. She goes to work, she's having these conversations, blah, blah, blah. And then, so it is an informative book, but it tells it in the form of a story. And I think that if you're and it also, it's like one of the quickest reads ever, but it's a really good starting point if you're feeling totally overwhelmed by money in general, right?
I like it. There's another book that's out there that you just triggered. It's on my list. I was going to leave it off, but you just put it right in front of me. The Richest Man in Babylon by Samuel Clausen. Man, I think that's required reading. I'm going to make sure my children read that book. I'm going to make sure that my comrades, colleagues, my cadre, people I work with, I think everybody needs to read that book. It is the most rudimentary book about understanding money and how to utilize it to your benefit, how to take money and create leverage with it, right? We all talk about not working for money, putting our money to work. And that book is just quintessential. If you're about that life and really understanding it on a real rudimentary level, and then you can take it from there and make it as complex as you want. But man, I think, if every U.S. citizen read that book at least twice in their life, the negative savings rate and I firmly believe the degree of poverty and disenfranchisement that exists in this country, it wouldn't make it disappear, but trust me, a lot of people will be living a lot better and making better decisions than they are today by reading that book. I think that book is just so important, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Wow.
Any other books, Joanne? I know we could be here for days.
Yeah. I'm whittling them down, checking the ones off, and okay. Endless Referrals by Bob Berg. Right. When I am having conversations with new entrepreneurs and even established entrepreneurs, I want to say 80% of the time, when I start qualifying an entrepreneur and a business owner that has hit a rut and is having a difficult time finding new clients, or feels like they're just stale and they need a different type of clientele, they're doing the work, they're doing the work, they're doing activity, they're doing activity, they're doing everything they're supposed to do. But for some reason, it's just not clicking, man, and they're not earning revenue anymore. 80% of the time is because they're not asking for referrals. It's crazy, right? I learned early on when I started out as an investment advisor, I had not necessarily a mentor, because we didn't like each other too much, but he did offer me a lot of good advice. And one of the biggest pieces of advice he gave me said, man, look, the quickest route to destination is straight line. So you're spending all this money on marketing, you're spending all this time reading books and learning this strategy and learning this tactic and consuming all these YouTube videos. Just ask for the referral. You know, you have someone sitting in front of you who's happy with what you deliver. They're happy with you. They like you. They know you. They trust you. Ask for the referral, right? And if you're not comfortable asking for referrals, this book teaches you the process of how to earn referrals from individuals, not just simply ask and take and come up with tricky ways to get people's information. No, it just walks you through step by step. These are a lot of different strategies and mindsets you can employ to ask for referrals, right? You ask any restaurant owner, they hate losing a customer. They hate losing a customer. The biggest expense in the restaurant industry, one of the biggest expenses, is getting new clients to walk in through the door. And so once a person walks in the door, they want to keep them there, right? And they want them to come back with their family and friends. Everything that happens from the time you hit a restaurant door to the time you leave is about making sure you come back with friends, with referrals. And I would argue it has to be the same for any other business owner as well. That is the biggest expense. The most time that we spend, particularly if you're a micro business owner, 90% of your time and stress and energy is spent asking yourself, where's my next client coming from? And trust me, getting referrals is a lot less expensive and a lot less time consuming than all that other stuff. So that book by Bob Burg, Endless Referrals, gotta have that. Have it in your library. You have to read that book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Read it. So yeah, that came to mind listening to you as well when I was thinking about the whole marketing piece. Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, I have read that. That was a long time ago, though. That's an old book.
Yes, it is. I love that book because it just and I mean, they have several versions of it now at this point.
Right.
But the one theme that runs through all of those books is empathy. The ability to have empathy, to empathize. Having soft ears and soft eyes, being able to really sit down and understand what people are going through, what their pain points are, what people are really interested in, what needs really need to be met. When an entrepreneur has been successful for a long time, and we see this with large companies too, right? They go belly up overnight and we're like, what the hell happened? 9 times out of 10, it was because there was a disconnect between who their customers and clients are and what they needed, and the business being so caught up in its own bureaucracy, so caught up in its own inertia, that there was a failure to ask, are we still meeting the needs of this client, right? And empathy is a big piece of that. You're excited about your product service because of A, B, D, and C reason, not realizing that people are either buying or not buying your service because you're not satisfying their reasons, their wants, their needs, and understanding their mindset. So very, 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 very important book. It really is. And I know when you initially hear the topic, you might not think, how is this going to help me entrepreneur? Trust me, it will. And it's one of those books where you said something that caught me earlier, right? Because I look at books, good book's almost like good songs, right? You hear a song 10, 15 years ago, you hear it today because you experience different things. You've been exposed to different things. You hear the song and you hear it differently. and it's still a great song, right? That's what a really good book can do for you, right? And I believe Chicken Soup for the Soul is one of those books that you need to read, books that continually remind you to empathize and understand people, right? There's a quote out there by Zig Ziglar, where he basically says in so many words, I'm paraphrasing, that if you help people get what they want enough, you'll never want. You'll always have enough, right? And that book is a reminder of how important it is to kind of continue to inculcate that, right, in your system. So that's another one that I've been thinking about as I've been listening to you as well and having this conversation. Gosh, man, there's like several more. I know we're running short on time. I just looked at the clock. All right, we go on and on. I'm gonna stop there because I got like 10 more on my list. Yeah.
All right. We can save it for the book roundup number 2.
Yes.
Well, hopefully, if you were wondering where to start with your reading journey, if you've read a bunch of stuff and you don't know what to start next, if you're looking for things to tell your family and friends to get you for the holidays, here's a giant list of books. So we will make sure to include all the books in our description of this video so that you can dive right into it. And please feel free to share with us what books have made a huge impact on your lives, if any of them are the ones we mentioned or ones that we didn't. We're always looking for new things to read ourselves. So keep